A year after Steve Burns filmed the Blue's Clues pilot, he had a small role in an episode of Law and Order. And I thought the idea of seeing Steve from Blue's Clues in a gritty, realistic cop show was kind of funny, so I decided to track down the 1995 episode titled Cruel and Unusual. Just
I say on my mama son, I'ma get y'all right. Look at her, man. I've been really in the rabbit hole of my childhood being ruined. I'm glad that it's being ruined because I finally know the truth. But I'm thinking about the younger me sitting there watching that. Oh, this wasn't going on when I was watching that. Why did I not see that stuff? I was just so distracted. First of all, I want to know why they distract us this hard. Because the things that I'm going down a rabbit hole and finding out about my childhood TV shows, they're not too good. They're not too, something I will be proud about. You understand me? So, these TV shows that I watch on early mornings or before I went to school, watching your brothers and sisters go off to school and you can't go to school, or you on the weekend and you watching your favorite shows, well, I'm here to tell you, Blue's Clues was one of my favorites. And that motherfucker didn't ruin my childhood cause Peep Game. Steve in Blue's Clues was by himself the entire time. See, 2 years ago when I ran across this Blue's Clues new episode, it was in 2022, my bad, not 2 years ago, about 3 years ago. Ran past some stuff where it was a new person of Blue's Clues, because I haven't watched Blue's Clues in a long time, but obviously it's his cousin with the blue shirt on that's matching Blue, the dog, so the puppy. So I had to do my rabbit hole 3 years ago and never got to it because I'm just now starting to be consistent on my YouTube page. So hear me out about this. I went down a rabbit hole. Of course, I've been messing with my boy Alex. Go subscribe to him. He's dedicated his whole life to conspiracy theory. He probably a conspiracy theory himself. You know what I'm saying? But certain things he say in his videos is kind of certain things that I think. So I kind of use my boy videos to kind of further my point in our childhood is being ruined on why they pick these certain characters to play these things, normally knowing the stuff that they know about the character before they play them. So hear me out. Blue's Clues, as you a kid, soon as it come on, think channel 9 to be exact. That's a conspiracy in itself. Channel 9. First of all, we know what 9 is. Come on. A book. It opens. And it's a little house, drawing house. And as soon as you open it, it's a dude named Steve pop out. Hey guys, let's do it. But the very first time Steve opened this book, he was reading us. It wasn't no blue dog. He was reading us about the blue dog that popped out the book and became his imaginary best friend. So now it's Steve and all these imaginary things. Salt, pepper shaker, mop bucket, all of these imaginary things. You will wonder, why would the director want to play a cartoon like this? Because we know kids' imagination is crazy. And you know what other kids' imagination is crazy? Autism kids. See, now the thing about Steve is it was always something, because Steve never had real friends. That's a red flag in itself. You get me? So with Steve not having real friends, he was basically being a detective. A detective finding the clues around his house or wherever, and Steve would jump in a picture. So when I scroll past my boy Alex page, Alex literally compared Blue's Clues to Law and Order. I'm like, what? How do you compare Blue's Clues to Law and Order? But then I looked it up. Steve, who played Blue's Clues, got an episode in Law and Order. See, now, my theory on Steve having autism, or he's not a very healthy character, as I should say, the Law and Order theory kind of proves it. Now, it's too many comparisons in Law and Order and Blue's Clues in this one episode that I'm talking about. And they say the episode came out in 1992, which Blue's Clues aired in 1994, I believe. Well, I probably got them dates backwards. No, a year after Blue's Clues dropped, this episode aired. I watched the episode, the whole episode. Found so much stuff in this episode and came back to Alex. Alex broke it all the way down. I say, the best way you can do it. Now, what Alex didn't do is, Alex only told y'all the conspiracy theory. Alex did not leave the question. Why did they choose these characters to play this? Why is they playing these for these kids? Knowing we become what we see. We see it so much that it become our truth. These people become our heroes and idols. And the whole time, our heroes and idols are not even healthy or aware they self. What they say, you never want to meet your hero. What if, boy, if Steve was my hero, I would be highly upset with meeting him. Because he ain't going to be able to even have a nice conversation with me. But they used this boy on stage to film him. And then the worst of the Blue's Clues character they got a new one. I just got another conspiracy. Them probably some robots. Let's dig into Alex's theory on basically comparing Blue's Clues to Law and Order and finding out Steve ain't always healthy himself. Without further ado, Alex, on you.
Test your might.
He looks like a young adult, but he acts like a child. And he lives alone in a house where he spends his day jumping into picture frames or talking to unseen voices or inanimate objects. It just kind of sounds like I'm describing someone who is experiencing some kind of false reality. Even the way Steve moves around is strange. He never actually leaves the room, he just kind of pretends to walk in place while this fantasy world moves around him.
Come on.
Obviously that was more of a filming limitation, but it still adds to this feeling of fakeness. But other than these surface level weird vibes the show gives off, there's never actually been any strong evidence to prove one of these theories. And believe me, I and others have looked. It has been 28 years since this show first came out. You know, you'd think if there was actually some kind of smoking gun here, we would have found it by now. But what if that's because we've all been looking in the wrong place? So, the other day, I stumbled upon an interesting piece of Blue's Clues trivia. A year after Steve Burns filmed the Blue's Clues pilot, he had a small role in an episode of Law and Order. And I thought the idea of seeing Steve from Blue's Clues in a gritty, realistic cop show was kind of funny, so I decided to track down the 1995 episode titled Cruel and Unusual. Just a heads up, this episode deals with some pretty serious subject matter, so please proceed with caution. In this episode, Steve Burns plays a kid with autism named Kevin Jeffries.
Good morning, how are you? Great. What time is it? 10:15. No, it's 10:18.
We learn that Kevin has trouble communicating with others and often harms himself. So his parents sent him to live in a children's behavioral clinic.
Just what was the behavioral clinic doing for him?
When Kevin was 10, he started to hurt himself.
We didn't know what to do. We couldn't keep Kevin here. We had to send him away.
We later find out that the doctors at this clinic were horribly mistreating him by giving him intense electroshock therapy and forcing him to wear a sensory deprivation helmet for days.
He kept Kathy in this helmet for 3 straight days. This helmet cut off the blood supply to our daughter's brain.
The episode starts with Kevin after he's escaped from the facility, but tragically he gets arrested and later succumbs to the injuries sustained from his abuse and dies.
I don't know, Mike. I think the kid's dead.
And the rest of the episode follows the detectives investigating his death. So yeah, this is a very sad and serious episode, and it deals with some real systemic issues that are still a problem today. And like I was saying, this show is clearly very, very different than Blue's Clues. But what I find interesting about this is that for years, people have been trying to prove that Steve is actually in prison or a mental facility, and now we have this piece of media where we see Steve's actor in that exact position, and as far as I'm aware, no one's ever really talked about this. I mean, sure, Kevin's not schizophrenic, he has autism, but seeing as how he was being abused and put into sensory deprivation for days where he couldn't hear or see anything, you can kind of imagine that anyone in that position might try to escape to some kind of fantasy inside of their head. So yeah, I thought this was an interesting coincidence, but at the end of the day, that's kinda all it was. Like, obviously, just because the same actor shows up in 2 different shows doesn't mean they're actually connected. But then, I took a closer look at this episode, and I started to notice more and more weird similarities between Kevin and Steve. At first, it just started with some little things. We are told by Kevin's parents that he was learning to draw.
Thanks to him, Kevin was learning to draw.
And in every episode of Blue's Clues, Steve draws in his handy-dandy notebook.
Our handy-dandy? Notebook. Let's draw a rectangle, and there, cheese.
Okay, but so what? Lots of kids like to draw. But we are also told that when Kevin harmed himself, he was strapped to a chair.
We put them in a chair, and then we hold them there using soft cuffs.
And in every episode of Blue's Clues, Steve spends a lot of time in his thinking chair.
We're ready to sit in our
thinking chair.
Now that we're in our thinking chair, let's think.
And then, when Kevin escaped the facility, he kept asking people what time it was.
What time is it? 10:15. What time?
How you doing today, huh?
What time?
Now, it is common for some people with autism to rely on specific schedules or routines, but what time it is also really important in Blue's Clues.
What time is it?
What time is it now?
Steve has a cleanup time,
We just had cleanup time.
a nap time.
It's Blue's nap time.
Now it's time for so long. There's a talking clock. And most of all, every day, Steve has mail time.
Hey, Blue, the mail's here.
So yeah, there's some weird similarities here, but nothing actually concrete. I didn't really start to take any of this seriously until I realized. After Kevin escaped, we are told that he went to a movie theater. And guess what he did in the theater?
Movie started at 10. He was out of here by 10 after 10. Got out of his seat, walked into the screen.
Kevin got out of his seat and tried to walk into the screen. Doesn't that sound exactly like Steve Blueskadooing into a picture?
Blueskadoo, we can too.
Got out of his seat, walked into the screen.
This kind of feels like more than a coincidence. So this is when I first started to consider, is it really possible that Kevin Jeffries from Law & Order is the real Steve and Blue's Clues is all a fantasy he created to escape his abusive reality? Okay, I know you're not convinced yet, and to be honest, neither was I, but don't worry, we are just getting started. Kevin's behavioral clinic is in New York City, and the one-time characters actually leave the Blue's Clues fantasy world and go to the real world, they end up in New York.
Blue's Clues in New York City?
This is epic!
Also, in the very first episode of Blue's Clues, we can see a newspaper from the New York Times inside of Steve's house, strongly implying that's actually where he lives. We can also see objects from Blue's Clues in Kevin's life. In Kevin's parents' house, we see a very large salt and pepper shaker, just like Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper.
Hi, Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve.
And in the clinic, we can see a red bucket, just like Steve's friend, Pale.
Hello, Pale.
Hi, Steve.
Also, when Steve left the show to go to college, he left on a blue bus. And when Kevin escaped the clinic, in his pocket he had a schedule for the Greyhound.
There you go.
Amtrak schedule, Greyhound schedules.
Which is also a blue bus. Alright, those are some more interesting connections, but you're probably still not completely sold yet, right? Well, check this out. When Steve eventually left the show to go to college, he was replaced by his younger brother Joe.
Oh, hi. It's me, Steve's brother Joe.
And later, Joe got replaced by their cousin, Josh.
Hi, it's me, Josh.
And not only does Kevin also have a younger brother, but at the clinic, there is a nurse named Joe.
What's your name?
Joe Garvey.
Joe Garvey. You're under arrest for assault.
And an occupational therapist named Josh.
Take a look at the amended complaint. An occupational therapist, Josh Bingham, was dropped.
I think that Kevin is taking aspects from his real life, like the objects or the names of the people working at the clinic, and applying them to his fantasy. Also, this one is less impressive, but the name Kevin is also the name of the Blue's Clues UK host.
Hello out there. It's me, Kevin.
Also, check this out. Kevin's behavioral clinic has the same initials as Blue's Clues. Huh? That one's also not that impressive, I know. But wait. If this theory is true, and all of this is just inside of Kevin's head, then why does the main character of his fantasy keep changing?
Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in.
Hi, come on in.
Well, at first, I thought maybe Joe and Josh could actually just be from two different kids who took Kevin's spot in the clinic after he died. But the clinic gets shut down at the end of the episode.
You made them close the clinic.
So they would all have to be from Kevin. But why? Well, we're told that Kevin has tried to escape from the clinic before.
Well, we called the police this morning as soon as the clinic told us that Kevin ran away. He's done this before.
So, what if every time a host leaves Blue's Clues, it's actually Kevin trying to escape the clinic, and when he's inevitably put back inside,
He's done this before.
his fantasy resets with a new Blue's Clues host.
Hi, come on in.
Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in.
Okay, so there is a surprising amount of connections here. You can't deny that. But it still kind of feels like we're missing something. Like, I can see why Kevin would imagine a fun, colorful world to escape his abuse, but why is Kevin's fantasy so focused on playing a scavenger hunt game with a blue dog? As far as I can tell, there's nothing similar to that in this episode. Well, I think to answer this, we need to take a closer look at what Blue's Clues actually is.
If you get stuck on a melody, or if you just feel like you can't get a song started, Output's co-producer is...
At the beginning of the Law & Order episode, Kevin's doctor explained to the detectives why Kevin harmed himself.
It's pretty common with some autistic children. It's frustration because of their inability to communicate.
It's frustrations because of his inability to communicate. Now, autism is a spectrum, and it's a lot more complicated and nuanced than the way TV shows like this tend to portray it. But it is true that some people with autism have varying levels of difficulty communicating. And I think this becomes interesting when we take a look at what Blue's Clues actually is.
Well, what story should we tell? Great idea. We'll play Blue's Clues to figure out what story Blue wants us to tell.
It's a game where you try to understand Blue, a character who has an inability to communicate. This is literally the entire premise of the show. So I think that this is telling us that Blue represents the side of Kevin who struggles to communicate with others. Okay, but where did the idea for a blue dog come from? Like I said, I couldn't find any references to dogs in this episode. The closest visual was this vaguely blue drawing in Kevin's room that I can't really make out, or this teddy bear that kind of had a similar pattern to Blue, but nothing really concrete, which is weird because Blue is such a major part of this fantasy. But then I realized it doesn't matter if we can't find a direct connection, because in Blue's Clues, Steve didn't actually adopt Blue. In a flashback episode of Blue's Clues, we learned that when Steve was younger, he read a book about a blue dog.
It's a book about a puppy.
Which caused Blue to magically come to life. And I think this is also probably what happened with Kevin. We see that the children's behavioral clinic is full of what we can reasonably assume are children's books. Maybe there's a book in here that also gave Kevin the idea for a blue dog, just like Steve. In fact, this idea of a children's book giving Kevin ideas for his fantasy is exactly what we see at the start of the Blue's Clues intro.
Hi, it's me, Steve.
Every single episode of Blue's Clues starts with a stack of children's books in the real world, before going inside of a book called Blue's Clues where the episode takes place. The show literally tells us every episode that Steve's world is fake and comes from a book. And I think this real world full of children's books is actually the Law and Order Behavioral Clinic. And if this is true, that also means that there's probably a book literally called Blue's Clues in the clinic that Kevin is basing his fantasy off of. So even if we never see a blue dog or even hear the name Steve in this Law & Order episode, Kevin still could have gotten all of those ideas from an existing Blue's Clues book in the clinic. Now, the only thing that doesn't really fit with this idea is mail time.
Hello, mailbox.
Hi, Steve. Have I got a letter for you?
Sure, maybe the talking purple mailbox was just something from the book, but there's no way Steve watching videos of kids in the real world would be something in a children's book.
Look, it's a letter from our friends.
Hi, Steve. This is where we play with our blocks. This goes that way.
So, what are these videos? Well, the behavioral clinic is full of other children.
You want to see what a good day is for some of these kids?
So, I think these videos are Kevin's perception of the other kids. There is just an undeniable amount of connections and similarities between this episode and this show. It just really feels like Blue's Clues is all a fantasy inside of Kevin Jeffries' head. But at this point, you're probably wondering, could any of this actually be intentional? Like, if this theory is true, does that mean that the entire plot of Blue's Clues was actually secretly based on this one random episode of Law & Order? I'll admit, that seems unlikely, especially since this episode came out a year after the Blue's Clues pilot was filmed. I think it's a lot more likely that if this was intentional, then it was probably just the Law & Order creators deciding to secretly connect these two shows on their own. Maybe just because they thought it would be funny, I don't know. Or maybe it's some weird mixture of both, because even years after this episode came out, Blue's Clues does still seem to weirdly line up with it. I honestly don't know. And to be fair, this could all still just be a bunch of weird coincidences and that's it. But regardless of the creator's intent, it still works, you know? And it makes talking about Blue's Clues a lot more interesting. And at the end of the day, I think that's kind of the point of all of these edgy Blue's Clues fan theories. And this was originally where I planned on ending this video. But there was still one lingering question that was bothering me. If Blue's Clues really is just inside of Kevin Jeffries' head, then what about when Kevin died at the beginning of the episode? I mean, I guess we can just say that the entire Blue's Clues timeline takes place before Kevin's death, and if the show ever gets canceled, then we can just say that that is when Kevin died and the fantasy ended. But what if I told you we've already seen Kevin's death inside of Blue's Clues? So I recently watched the new Blue's Clues movie from 2022 called Blue's Big City Adventure. And not only did I find even more similarities between this movie and the show, but I believe that this movie is showing us the day that Kevin died and the true end of the Blue's Clues timeline. So, this movie is about Josh, the newest host of Blue's Clues, going on a big adventure to audition for a Broadway musical in New York City.
Blue, we are definitely not in storybook world anymore.
It's kind of what you'd expect out of a modern-day Blue's Clues movie. He goes on a journey to the real world and gets lost. There's lots of wacky hijinks, but in the end, he finds his way and gets the part.
We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Yes, of course. Yes.
But if you watch this movie with this theory in mind, so many things take on a whole new meaning. The first thing that immediately caught me off guard was the opening song.
It's a brand new day.
This song is about starting the day, and Josh keeps saying, "Good morning."
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Blue.
And literally, the first thing we hear Kevin Jeffries say is, "Good morning."
So is Donovan. Good morning, how are you?
Despite it clearly being night. We also hear this line in Josh's song.
This life is just like a beautiful dream.
This life is just like a beautiful dream. Interesting. And while Josh sings, the other characters keep telling him to wake up.
Wake up! Wake up!
It's a brand new day.
Right away, this movie feels different, like it's trying to draw attention to the fact that this world is just Kevin's fantasy and it's time for him to leave it. Josh leaves his fantasy world to go to the audition in New York, just like how Kevin escapes the clinic at the start of the episode. And just like Kevin, Josh immediately seems very disoriented by the outside world. Until, of course, his fantasy starts to take over to protect him from reality. But what's interesting about this movie is that for the very first time ever, we get these little glimpses of Blue's Clues from other people's perspectives.
Don't you think so, Madam Mustard? Oh? Lovely to meet you.
Whoa! Mr. Salt! Mrs. Pepper! Am I glad to see you? Oh my God!
Like I said, this movie feels different. We learn that Josh's audition is at 3 o'clock, and the whole movie is just him trying to find the audition before time runs out.
It's almost time for my audition. Oh my gosh. We don't have much time, Blue.
Could this be why Kevin kept asking people what time it was?
What time is it? What time? What time?
Josh also doesn't know where his audition is. All he knows is that it's in a theater somewhere.
Excuse me. Do you know the address to the theater? Which theater? I don't know which theater.
Maybe this is why Kevin went to a movie theater after he escaped, because he thought it was his Broadway audition. Now, in the Law & Order episode, shortly after leaving the theater, Kevin gets arrested and then tragically dies in police custody. But that's not what happens in this movie. Josh goes to the theater and gets the part.
We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Yes, of course. Yes.
But instead of him leaving and dying like Kevin, we immediately cut to him performing the musical in a big climactic finale.
My dream is a reality.
So, if this movie really is Kevin's final escape, then what if this is what Kevin experiences as he dies?
And I can feel my world changing.
A massive final magical song where he's surrounded by all of the friends from his fantasy, the only people who ever really understood him. Even the old hosts show up for this final send-off for Kevin.
And thank you for making this a day and an adventure that I will never forget.
I'll never forget how you helped me find all those clues. Thanks again for all your help.
No, really. Now it's over. So long.
And that is sadly where Kevin Jeffries' story ends. Now, I know this final movie theory maybe doesn't have as much evidence as the rest of my theory, but regardless, I like thinking that maybe Kevin found some peace in his final moments. And yeah, I know that this movie came out 27 years after the Law & Order episode, so it's probably a stretch to say that they're still connected. Wait, is that fucking B.D. Wong?
I'm the director of Rainbow Puppy's Broadway musical.
B.D. Wong from Law & Order SVU is the fucking director of Josh's musical?
I'm not entirely comfortable labeling the suspect a serial killer. We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Holy shit!
We just figured out Blue's Clues. We just figured out Blue's Clues.
Test your might.